we are going to cook a lawn ornament today, something that you currently have on your porch. Is it A, the rocking chair, B, your do not trespassing sign or you'll be shot, C, a pumpkin? Probably C, don't you think? The rocking chair might be hard to cook. Well, how many of us this time of year have one of these things on our porch? It's a lawn ornament. Few people think of this as food, but you know what it is? Actually, the crime of it all is that people think of the stuff that's in the can as food. Now, that is incredibly convenient. Open a can, make pumpkin something. But like so many things in cooking, our ingredients matter so much. So certainly not the one you've already carved into a jack-o'-lantern that's been sitting on your porch for a month and is moldy inside. That one we're not going to cut. One that you haven't cut into yet, we certainly can. And you know, the pumpkin is involved in so much literature and lore. Think about it. Cinderella, her pumpkin turned into a carriage. We carve jack-o'-lanterns to scare people away. Witches turn people into pumpkins, right? The great pumpkin, Charlie Brown. I'll never forget that. Actually, the only literature that ever uses pumpkin as food is Harry Potter. Don't they drink pumpkin juice or something at Hogwarts? Anyway. The Greeks called it pipon, P-E-P-O-N. The French then called it pompon, P-O-M-P-O-N. The British, of course, they had to change that. They call it pompion, P-O-M-P-I-O-N. And the Americans, of course, wanting to change from anything British, we called it pumpkins. But pumpkin seeds have been around for 7,000, actually been found 7,000 BC in Mexico. It's our friends the honeybees that fertilize our pumpkins. This is another reason that honeybees are so important. So in cooking the pumpkin, basically what we want to do is make a puree. It's not like a potato, it's a gourd, it's a squash. So we wouldn't do chunks of pumpkin that we then roasted. It's not going to have a very good texture or flavor to it. What we're going to do is puree it and then flavor it. And we can do this by boiling, steaming, or roasting, moist methods or dry methods. And it all depends on what our desired outcome is. If we're going to make a soup, probably a moist method would be better. If we're doing puree to make pumpkin ravioli, or even just a mashed pumpkin that's seasoned well as a nice side dish, then we might do a dry cooking method because we want it a little bit drier. But you know, the nutritional value of pumpkin is tremendous, and it's a shame that we just use it for an ornament, because pumpkin, in some studies, I've read studies where it helps diabetics. It actually helps pumpkin extract, pumpkin seed extract, helps the regeneration of pancreatic cells. This increases insulin in the bloodstream, it's been showed. The pumpkin seeds as well, very high in protein, high in zinc, and there have been studies that show that the pumpkin seeds and the oil in it helps lower cholesterol. But we don't think of these things as food, we think of them as porch ornaments. Show you how we're going to do it today. First thing we're going to do is cut the thing in half and pull all the seeds out. To cut the pumpkin in half, my chef's knife might be a good choice because I can certainly pierce into it, but a smooth knife like this might slip with a really tough gourd. What I'm going to want is my serrated slicing knife, and do this in a sawing fashion. So I'm going to start right up here. And these are tough. This is a little bit of work to get this going. Get my knife in and saw through it, and saw the pumpkin in half. This is not an easy thing by any means, and you see why we need the teeth of the serrated slicing knife as I battle with it even more. All right, stay with me now. We got a lot to do. Once we've got the gourd open, I like to take my ice cream scoop, put those seeds in a pan, and take the other half of the gourd that's been dug out. We're going to skin one of them for a moist cooking method, taking the skin off with our serrated slicing knife. Now be careful. This is a tough product. Your knife can slip at any given time. You would not want it to move very quickly toward your other hand and cut yourself. It's a tough product. It's a sharp knife. After cubing that goes in boiling water, and we'll cook this in a moist process. The other half of the pumpkin is going to go on a sheet pan for the oven, brushed with some butter to cover it with fat, and baked skin side up to retain as much moisture as possible. The pan with the seeds now, what I've done is filled it with water, and taking a strainer with a separate bowl,
start to pick the seeds out and lay them in the strainer. Once the strainer is filled with as many seeds, I see that the seeds will actually float to the top of the water, making them easy to pick out, and all the guts of the pumpkin wind up in the bottom. I pour the seeds out onto a nice clean towel, and with a mixture of brown sugar, chipotle pepper, and cinnamon, I'll add the pumpkin seeds slightly dried to the cinnamon mixture. They go on a sheet pan and they'll get baked in the oven until they're dry. Our boiled pumpkin is ready now under the moist process and goes in the food processor with a little bit of the boiling liquid, which tastes like pumpkin. It comes out to a very smooth, bright yellow puree. I put this in a Ziploc bag inside a pitcher because the Ziploc bag will hold it if I want to freeze it or use it later. The squash that came out of the oven, well, I tear that with a spoon, taking the skin away, and that will be pureed in the food processor in a separate fashion. This is going to have a much grainier, much more orange texture because of the dry cooking process. Into a Ziploc bag it goes for later use.
So what do you do with your lawn ornament, your gourd, when the holidays are over? Well, the object is, number one of my favorite things is the seeds. Dusting them in some kind of flavoring, brown sugar, cayenne pepper, cinnamon, any kind of flavor profile you want. You can make them kind of taco Mexican with some cumin and coriander and so on. And secondly, from the flesh of the pumpkin, you need to make some kind of puree. And the puree can wind up to be anything. But two different ways that you can create this are in a moist cooking method. And here is the pumpkin that we boiled. Look how orange that is, really a little closer to yellow, very bright. And look how thin and smooth it is as well. Versus the one that we cooked under a dry process. We roasted this half of the pumpkin. And look how much grainier this is. Look how much more orange rather than yellow, and how much stiffer this is. So why would you do one method over the other? Depends entirely on what you're trying to cook. If I were going to make a pumpkin soup, I would probably cook it under a moist method and be able to infuse some vegetable broth, flavor from vegetable broth or chicken broth or something like that in there. And this might be a soup, or it might be just a side dish for a puree or something like that. If I were going to make one of my favorite things, pumpkin ravioli, take this and mix it up with some egg to stiffen it a little bit, cheese if you would like, and then seasonings, and seal it in some pasta dough. Pumpkin ravioli, if you were going to make pumpkin pie, if you were going to serve this as a side dish, kind of like mashed potatoes instead, I would use a dry process because it makes it a little stiffer and a little tougher. So what do you do with that lawn ornament when the holidays are over? Respect it. Treat it like food. It's not a lawn ornament, it's food. There are people that don't have food in this world, unfortunately. Show your kids respect for the food, not the ornament, and come up with something. Doing the seeds is a lot of fun for kids as well, but there's so many different processes using this pumpkin puree. I don't have time to give you everything that you can do with pumpkin puree.
Go home. We have no treats for you here.